Hey everybody, and Tony here with a review of Mozart's Don Giovanni, live from the Metropolitan Opera House, which I saw last night at the Kino and Cultura Brauerei. The conductor was Fabio Luisi. The production was done by Michael Grandage. The set designs and costumes were done by Christopher Oram. The lights were handled by Paul Constable. The filmographer was Matthew Diamond, and the choreographer was Ben Wright. I was mainly anticipating this production because Simon Keenlyside portrayed our anti-hero slash villain protagonist. This was a role he was closely associated with for his entire career. Not to mention, he was also a singer I was not only familiar with, but one who I've been following his career for quite some time, whether I was listening to some of his records or listened to some clips of him on YouTube, or even once saw him live as Peleas from Debussy's Peleas et Mélisande at the Royal Opera House when I was only 15 years old, and I watched this opera alongside my dad. Also in the cast were Adam Plachetka and Matthew Rose, two singers who I also saw 2 years ago at the Deutsche Oper Berlin performing Don Giovanni and Leporello respectively, but this time they sang the roles of Leporello and Masetto. I'll get to them later, but first, the production. Even though it was really elegant, what with having it set in different apartments and different piazzas, I felt like it was kind of monotonous. I would have loved to have a lot more locations, like have some countrysides, some more streets, maybe even some more cemeteries, and even grand halls. That would have also amped up the entire production. But as it is, it was decent to look at, but I would have loved to have a lot more variety. But the costumes were absolutely elegant. So overall, I'm sort of so-so with the entire production, even though it looks really elegant, but the costumes were just fabulous. And now we get to the singers, starting off with Simon Keenlyside as our titular villain protagonist, Don Giovanni. As I stated before, Simon Keenlyside was not only a singer I was familiar with, but I've been following his career for quite some time. My first experience with Mr. Keenlyside was when I first bought a CD of Gounod's Romeo et Juliette, starring Roberto Alagna and Angela Gheorghiu in the leads, and he sang Mercutio. My first impression of his voice was it was a very pliable and lyrical instrument, and he had a great future ahead of him. Much like his predecessors Dietrich Fischer-Dieskau, Eberhard Wächter, Hermann Prey, and Thomas Hampson, he was basically hailed as a very fine cavalier baritone who also specialized in a great deal of comical roles from the lyric baritone repertoire. But these days, his voice seems to head to slightly more dramatic roles like Rigoletto, Germont, and Scarpia. Heck, even Wozzeck from Berg's Wozzeck. And he also has a stable amount of lieder repertoire. And I even saw him on DVD as Papageno from the Royal Opera House's production of Mozart's Die Zauberflöte. I was initially fearful for Mr. Keenlyside because, given the fact that he is in his late 50s, I was scared that his voice was going to sound wobbly, tired, and worn out. Well, not tonight. In fact, his voice sounded very youthful, masculine, and just full of vivacity, vibrance, and just that right amount of menace, charm, and beauty which he has been so well known for. It should be no surprise that Mr. Keenlyside has sung Don Giovanni in his entire career, and he still continues to find a lot of nuances and a lot of facets that make Don Giovanni the way he is. And during his interview, I really saw how much of an intelligent singer he truly is, and it definitely came to life of how he portrayed the Don. He was intelligent, he was smarmy, he was kind of over the top, but nonetheless, he had that fire and passion which he was so well known for when it came to his interpretation of Don Giovanni, a role that he was closely associated with his entire career. Singing his Leporello was Adam Plachetka, and what a voice he continues to have. It is rich and round, but at the same time very pliable and just so agile throughout the registers. And as an actor, he was very charismatic, a lot of fun to watch, and he was just a total charmer. He really knew how to make Leporello a very charming character. He was just so much fun to watch on stage, and his chemistry with Simon Keenlyside as the Don was just a lot of fun. What with Mr. Plahetka's Leporello being more of the deadpan snarker and the straight man, and having Mr. Keenlyside being a bit more over the top and just so glorious in his interpretation. I just had a lot of fun watching Mr. Plahetka really give the goods as Leporello. He's tall, he's handsome, and he really knows how to act the part with such flying colors, making him a very charismatic and just an overall charming and wonderful performer all throughout. Then we have the Commendatore, sung by Kwang Chul Yoon. And while I'm not a fan of his excessive vibrato, I have to give him credit for his firm and steady stage presence. It's a stage presence that just makes you feel so in awe of this character every time he comes on stage. It is commanding, demanding, and he really knows how to play these type of regal and fatherly characters with the best of his abilities. Yes, I would have loved to have a firmer, darker voice a la Matti Salminen, or what we had back then with the likes of Gottlob Frick, Kurt Böhme, Martti Talvela, Paul Benda, or even Ludwig Weber. But as he is, he's still a very solid performer, even though his voice did show signs of weariness, and even though the vibrato was quite evident in terms of how he sang. But still, you have to give the guy credit for being a superb actor on stage and for really handling this small yet very important role with dignity and his own sense of charm. Masetto was sung by Matthew Rose, and he had a very, very fine voice. It makes me wonder that he could have switched with Adam Plahetka so that Adam Plahetka could sing Masetto and Rose sing Leporello. His voice is a little bit too stentorian for my tastes for something like Masetto, but he still manages to give his burly nature with such a fine sense of intelligence and a fine sense of what this character needs and wants in his life. It's still a very fun portrayal of a very fine character role, and his voice definitely helps, as it is a round, rich, and quite cavernous instrument, which makes him quite imposing on stage, but not too imposing. He still manages to balance that imposing nature with a very huggable, charismatic, and lovable nature, which he brought really well to Masetto. Paul Appleby's superbly sung Don Ottavio was definitely something I looked forward to. I did hear a couple of clips of this gentleman on YouTube, and I thought he had a very fine voice. And wow, I would love to hear more of this gentleman in the near future. He has a very bright, well-focused, lyric tenor voice, which he used to his advantage very, very well. And he just sang with abandon. And in terms of his acting, he was able to make Don Ottavio a pretty strong character in his own right. Because let's face it, Don Ottavio is not only the only tenor role in this opera, but he seems to be getting a lot of flack from hardcore opera fans for being too weak, too passive, and just not too manly compared to the other lower voices. But Paul Appleby manages to bring in lots of charisma, lots of charm, and a sense of great intelligence to this character, which makes him all the more endearing and all the more wonderful. And then we have Malin Bistrom, who sang Donna Elvira. I've heard this name pop up every once in a while, and I even saw a couple of clips of her on YouTube singing Donna Anna. And she has a very pliable, creamy, rich, and just plain gorgeous instrument of a full lyric soprano. Yes, I'm not that much of a fan of some of her coloratura work because there were times that she took a pause to take a breath when she sang those florid lines. And yes, it was a pretty hard job for her to sing this character, Donna Elvira. But I still have to give her credit for her musicianship and that really wonderful color in her voice. It is just a wonderful color that I love to listen to. It's full, it's rich, yet very pliable, and it just sounds very gorgeous. She has a very gorgeous instrument, even though some of her coloratura did tend to sound choppy and did tend to sound like she was not going to make it all the way through. I still have to give her credit for her acting, which she managed to play this character with such abandon, and of course, that beautiful color in her voice. Then we have Hibla Gartsmava as Donna Anna. And while I really love the fact that she sang this role with such abandon and with such clarity and declamation, she does have that certain stridence which is very evident in her voice. Yes, that stridence is also used to such a great effect when she proclaims her want for revenge against Don Giovanni, but at the same time, she kind of needs to trim down that stridence a little bit. But regardless, it is still a very exciting instrument which she brought to the table. It's full, it's rich, it is very agile, and I could definitely smell a future for her in a role like Lucrezia Borgia or Anna Bolena. Her voice definitely has a lot of potential to sing all those big bel canto roles. Serena Malfi was a very charming and pretty saucy Zerlina, helped by the fact that she has a very gorgeous lyric mezzo voice, which is so useful when it comes to singing all of these grand bel canto coloratura mezzo roles. This is the third time I have seen this mezzo, and she continues to be just as gorgeous and just as lovely as she has ever been. So overall, the singing was really, really superb, and the conducting done by Fabio Luisi was quite well done. It's brisk and it is just lively in its own special way, and the chorus was just so awesome, especially the orchestra. So overall, this was definitely a grand Don Giovanni, and I have to give Simon Keenlyside a whole lot of kudos for continuing his elegant and just plain energetic performance of this iconic character, a role that he has been singing for quite a long time. Well, that's all for now. Be sure to tune in later for my review of Richard Strauss's Elektra at the Staatsoper im Stadttheater. So until then, have a great day, everybody.